we're now in a position where we can apply the last few treatments to the image. What I'd like to do is just darken down the sky at the top here and darken down the sky towards the base so that we're concentrating the viewer's eyes along the middle. And then I'll need to final sharpen the image before saving it for print as a Photoshop file. So if we look in the history, we can see what we've done so far. We've got to the end where we cropped it finally to the size dimensions of 16 by 12. So now I want to work in the layers panel here, and I want to create a gradient. So the best place to do the gradient is in the layers panel. So if I click on the adjustment layers here, we can see that we've got lots of options for adjustment layers, but one of them is gradient. So I'm going to select that, and you can see immediately that we have a gradient applied, and the little gradient fill box is here. Now the gradient that we can see here is a solid color to a transparent, and we've got options in here as to what we want to select. So I want solid color to transparent, and the solid color is based on the foreground color here. So this is what I want. I want a darkening effect going through to a transparent. Now we can click in the image and move whereabouts our the gradient affects itself, but you can see that we've got quite a gradual gradient, and it's going all the way to the top of the image. So I want to go to the scale and drag that maybe to around about 30. We can use the up and down arrow keys to get a more accurate number in there because it's a little bit fiddly this. And once we've got it, the transition as we want it, we can again go into our image and drag it to where we want it positioned. But if you notice, it's still applying a little bit of a gradient up here as well, but we can sort that out later. All we've got to do is say OK on that one. But now we can see that we've got a very dark area because basically it's just painted the pixels black. So with the gradient selected, so I've just clicked on the icon here, we can go to what's called our blending modes, and this determines how that layer is going to interact with the layers below. And one of the best blending modes for this sort of effect is either overlay or soft light. Soft light is a slightly less harsh rendering of overlay, and when I do that, you can see that we've got rid of the black paint, and basically it's just darkening the underlying pixels. And if I wink out the eye, you can see that's what's happened. If we think it's still too severe, we can go to our opacity and drag that down. Okay, so we can infinitely change the effect. I'll leave it maybe around about 90 or so, like that. I want to apply a similar treatment to the top. So again, we can go to our gradient, and this time we could, I want it going from black from the top to transparent, so we have an option here to reverse. Okay, we can of course drag this around to whatever angle we wish, but just using the reverse box there, that's quite a useful feature. And again, we can scale our gradient to, just using the keyboard keys here, to 30. Into the image, drag to where we want the gradient effect. Select OK. Go to our blending mode. Select overlay, and maybe just drag that back down to 90% or so. If we're not quite happy with the position of one of these gradients, or any of the gradients, all you got to do is double click the gradient icon, and it brings back our gradient fill menu. And again, we can just go into the image, click and drag to reposition however we want it. Because of the way the gradients have maybe affected some of the central portion of the image, I'd like to just boost that a little bit. So I'm going to select the background image, which is the picture itself, and I'm going to go to create another. We'll create a curves adjustment layer, and here what I want to do is try and increase the brightness a little bit whilst controlling one or two other aspects of the image. So I've selected down here, you can see we've got to apply the curves in the properties panel here, and we can apply different nodes. Okay, and once you've got a node like that one there, that is anchoring, that's saying I'm going to stay here whatever you do, and it will apply a curves adjustment to the rest of the image. So I could maybe drag that down to about there. You can see you've got to be very careful because you can get some really wacky sort of effects, so you've got to be very careful what you do with these tone curves, and don't adjust it too much. But I'm trying to boost the brightness of the image just a little bit without blowing out the highlights or the shadow area. So for the purpose of this demonstration, let's just assume that that is what I want. And we can see if we go to our layers panel, I'll just wink out that, so you can see that that's the effect that we've got. Maybe we need to just go back to that gradient and bring that up to 100%. Maybe the same with that one as well, 100%. Okay. And if we're still not happy with the curves adjustment, just double click the curves adjustment and we go back to our properties panel and maybe just reduce that effect just a little bit. Okay, so we can keep on tweaking these because it's an adjustment layer. You can adjust them as many times as you like and it doesn't degrade the image at all. Now I want to final sharpen the image. Okay, so this is best done at 100%. I'm going to select the background layer because when you sharpen an image, it's got to be done to the pixels of the image. You can't sharpen an adjustment layer like this, so it's got to be the pixels image. And I've just pressed Control Alt and the 0 key to bring it to 100%, and you can see we've got 100% magnification here. Press the space bar and you can move around the image. Now there's different ways of sharpening an image, but there's only two that I'd recommend, and I think there's only two that most people recommend, and that's go to Filter, we've got Sharpen, and the two bottom ones, Smart Sharpen or Unsharp Mask. So I'm going to use the Unsharp Mask in this instance. And that brings up a little dialog box that appeared off screen. Now then, we've got the amount. Don't forget that we've already applied a little bit of pre-sharpening to this image in Lightroom. So we may not need quite as much as you may be used to before you do your final sharpening for print. So we need to back it off just a little bit. Now the amount, that is the same as in Lightroom. It changes the amount of sharpening, and as you can see, I'll just drag up the radius slider. If we apply too much sharpening, we can really damage our image. So the radius again needs to be down to about 1 up to about 1.4. So I'll leave that about 1.2. Okay, and the amount, because this is sharpening for print, we need to do that so that it affects the image a little bit more than you would normally do, because of the way the ink bleeds into the paper through an inkjet type of process. So I'll probably leave that around about 100 to 160 or so, depending on the image. I mean, this is again a metallic aircraft, so this can probably do with a little bit more sharpening than, say, a nature photograph, which is more generally softer. So maybe about 120. This threshold, you may notice that it doesn't appear to be sharpening. I'll tell you what, I'll just drag this right up here. it doesn't appear to be sharpening this area here of sky. This is because of the threshold. If I drag the threshold to 0, you may have been able to see that we're starting to get sharpening in this area here as well. In fact, if I drag the radius up, you can see in the sky we've got the sharpening effect applied there. If I drag the threshold, this is behaving like the mask slider in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw. I've dragged it to about 6 and it's saying to itself, okay, if there's a difference of like 6 tones, shades of tone between myself and the adjacent pixel, I will sharpen myself. If there isn't, or there's less than 6, I won't apply sharpening to it. So that's what it's doing. Any smooth tones, the sharpening effect will not be applied to it. So I normally go from about 3 to about 6 or 10, depending on the nature of the image. So let's just try 6 here. And again, if you can't get it quite right, just use the up or down arrow keys on the keyboard. Let's bring this down to about 120, 130 or so, and the pixel radius of about 1.2, something like that. Okay, so that's the sharpening applied for print. I'll say OK. Control 0. So the image is now ready for print. So I want to save this so that I don't lose all my work. So I'm going to go to File, Save As. Now you'd normally do this to an area in your computer where you save for print or something like that. Because this is a demo, I'm going to go to my demo shows, Lightroom demos. I'm saving it as a Photoshop file. You could save it as a TIFF file, which Adobe tend to recommend more these days. I'm saving it as a Photoshop file because that's just my method of doing things. And I'm going to call it 2 times Mirage Jets, because that's what they are. And I'm going to save it. Now we can see that the ICC profile has been saved as Profoto RGB. It's still in this 16 bits per channel and it's got all the layers intact. Save. Okay, so it's saving that, and the next process will be to send the image to print. I'll do that in the next video.